I would recommend all CPA candidates to take it as early as possible before work picks up. But if for whatever reason you're unable to, it is possible to pass while working full time. You just have to be
Let's
dedicated.
welcome our next guest who just recently passed the CPA exam.
Hello, my name is Joshua Harris. I am currently a auditor at a public accounting firm in Los Angeles, California. I am originally from Massachusetts and went to school in Massachusetts as well at Northeastern University.
How did you study for the CPA exam in general?
The way I studied for the CPA exam is I took a very analytical approach to it. I had the goal of trying to squeeze in 2 chapters a week. So 2 chapters in 7 days, which is about 2.5 or about 3, like 3 days, 1 chapter, 4 days, another one, or 3 days, 1 chapter, 3 days, the second chapter, maybe 1 day doing a comprehensive review. So depending on the exam, it has different amounts of chapters. So as long as I can get 2 done in a week, and I'll do that continuously up until I get about 2 weeks out from my exam. So at that point, I would have studied all of the information within the chapter, and that 2-week period is kind of where I cram all of it together and review everything that I've been studying the past couple of months. So I leveraged the multiple choice questions. I looked at all the lectures. I took notes. I rewrote my notes. I did simulations. But when it came down to the mock exams itself, I chose to skip them actually. And yeah, believe it or not. So my basis or my reasoning for skipping the mock exams was that I felt like I wasn't being tested on the whole material itself. So an exam, depending on what it is about 30 multiple choice, 2 testlets of those, and then sims, right? So if I'm looking at a 10 chapter study process, me only doing 60 or 70 multiple choice questions for 10 chapters, there's a high likelihood that I'm gonna end up missing something that I might need to know on the exam. So my 2-week cramming session, I did my own mock exams, if you will. So I did a approach of, and this is after I've done the multiple choice and studying on a weekly basis. I would do a targeted sample of 10 multiple choice questions per module each chapter. So that way I'm doing a lot more than just the 60 I do in a mock exam. I'm still being mindful, making sure I'm not taking too much time on questions. So in that aspect, I was able to make sure I got used to the feel of how quick I should be spending on questions. But from there, I would see how I scored in that statistical sample, and I would then study the areas that I had trouble with much more. So after I've done that, I then would do 10 questions each chapter, which is about 100. If we're doing 10 chapters, about 100 multiple choice questions. So again, I'm cycling through much more multiple choice than I would in a mock exam, but I'm really trying to pinpoint what areas do I have issues with so I can brush up on them and be ready by test time. So that, coupled with some days dedicated only to simulations, was my test approach. I told myself I can't spend more than an hour on each testlet when it comes to multiple choice. So I wanted to keep at least 2 hours of free time to answer the modules, or the simulations, I should say. So if I was aware if I was taking too long on the first testlet or the second testlet of multiple choice, I would need to pick it up in order to make sure I had enough time in the back end to answer all the simulations that they had for me. So when the simulations came, I think during one of my breaks, I took like 2 minutes to figure it out, but depending on how much questions they give you in a simulation, you can then break down how much time I can spend on each sim. right? So best case, you take less time than necessary so you could add more time to maybe a simulation that's going to give you trouble. Worst case, once you hit that threshold, you kind of either just got to wrap it up quickly or keep going, because you're going to end up getting backed up, and that's going to dock you later down the road on some simulations you might know, but you might just not have time to get to. Yeah, it was a very comprehensive way of studying everything. But my biggest paranoia was that I would be tested on something that I I knew I remember learning, but I just didn't take enough time to drill it in my head. So I wanted to make sure I was solid in every single subject. My I guess study routine was I read through all the blogs, got all the opinions on what works for some people, watched countless hundreds of YouTube videos of people sharing their study tips, and then I kind of made it work for me and how my brain works and how I remember certain things. And I just executed it. There were, the first couple of tries, I think were trial and error. Um, the first time I took the exam, I think that's what made me realize that you have to go into it having a structure in terms of timing. So once I knew that, it was easy for me to know how much time I needed to spend on certain things without needing to take a mock exam for 4 hours just to get the feel of it.
How do you study for multiple choice questions?
Yep. So for multiple choice questions, I did the 2 chapters a week approach. So after every lecture, um, I would attempt to do at least 20 multiple choice problems immediately after. And so that way, that would help me take what I learned in the lecture or read in the book and start applying it to multiple choice questions. At that point, I then move on to the next chapter. So by the weekends, I really leveraged the weekends because I was working while I was studying. So the weekdays, I only had maybe 3 or 4 hours tops to study a day. But the weekends, I have from sunrise to sundown, right? So I could really drill as many multiple choice questions as I needed to that I had previously dabbled in during the weekdays, but the weekends I really just drilled multiple choice questions. And if I got them wrong, I made sure I read each question to understand why it wouldn't be these answers and why it is the correct answer.
How do you study for simulation questions?
Not every second of the day to do multiple choice. I made it a point to study some sims here and there. It just takes a lot longer to go through simulations than it does multiple choice problems, right? So I might dedicate 75% of my weekend on multiple choice questions and then 25 on sims. And when it came down to that last week, when I went through hundreds and thousands of multiple choice, I went through some simulations, I actually sat down and just watched the instructor on the online course explain simulation. So although I wasn't uh, testing myself on it, I was still watching to understand the concept and the flow that they needed to go through to get the answer. So that helped as well. I would say the way I study for simulation. So I I purposely, maybe for like a day every couple of weeks, I would only focus on the research questions, right? To get down the speediness of searching keywords and finding what I needed, because those types of questions were the situations where I might have 12 minutes allocated to each question, but if I can get that research question done in 2 minutes, I just bought myself 10 minutes for some other questions. So I focused on those specifically, and then after those for the simulations, um, and the simulations I had were really just very similar to the ones that were on the exam. So I just drilled a few, made sure that I was getting them. If there was anything that I wasn't getting, I made sure. Oh, bless you. I made sure that I was watching the instructor explain it again so I could understand the concept and understand what I got wrong. and if whether I was close, so if it was just maybe one little detail that I didn't remember that messed it up for me, or if I completely just didn't know the material, I then would need to double back and look at the lectures and read. And I think the multiple choice helped me understand the concepts, so when I was in the simulation, I could apply that knowledge to the open-ended question.
How do you take study notes?
So I took a similar approach that I took in college. So I'm a very visual type of learner. So I watched the lectures as if it was a professor, and I would underline or highlight the material in the books that we had, and then after the lectures, I would then look at everything in the book that was highlighted in the small little notes and mnemonics that they had created for us, and I wrote them down. I hand wrote them down, just as an extra layer to learn it, really understand everything that I highlighted and everything that I'm writing down to remember it. So by the end of my studying, and I don't know if you saw my picture on LinkedIn, I had these papers spread out everywhere. So all those papers were all my notes, and that was just for one exam. So I essentially had rewrote the book just with all my notes, just to again kind of hammer that information in my head, and that's just what works for me. I'm not saying everybody should do that, but I mean, if some people are good at typing notes, that might be quicker for them and less labor intensive. Some people don't need to do notes, but at least for me, note taking helped me get that initial understanding of a lot of the material. Yeah, I will tell you, it helped out in those final 2 weeks, because when there were chapters that I was iffy on, I was able to just go to the notes, and that was like a concentrated version of the book. So it was much easier for me to read down everything that I had taken notes on than have to read through a textbook trying to decipher and understand it. So I think it does help you in the long run with being able to kind of cycle through all of that information much quicker. Like you said, you can make certain keywords, maybe underline them in red, so it just stands out more in your head and something you can remember later. When you're trying to take those multiple choice questions or simulations, or do a quick, say you only have 30 minutes on lunch break to study, you can just quickly go down through different keywords and all of that. So I definitely recommend it if someone is willing to put in the time to handwrite their notes like we did.
Which material did you study first for the CPA exam?
The order that I studied the material was with the video lecture. While I was doing the video lecture, I would do my quick notes, because the lecturer would, tell us what to underline and certain hints or quick tricks to memorize certain things. So I would take those notes as I was watching the videos. At that point, after the lecture is done, there were they're not Sims, they're kind of watered down versions of Sims, so they're not as large as a simulation, but they're asking you a question, you have to answer it. It's not multiple choice, right? So I would do that again to make sure I understood what I just learned, and then I would do the set of 10 or 20 multiple choice questions just to get used to answering questions of what I just learned in a multiple choice format, and then I would follow that until I finished the chapter, go on to the second chapter, and then by the weekend I would use both Saturday and Sunday to study everything that I had just went over.
What was the most difficult section for you?
My two hardest sections, let me see if I can narrow it down, but my two hardest sections were Reg and FAR. I would say FAR was probably the hardest section for me, and it's the most accounting that I got when I was in college. So even though it's the most accounting I got when I was in college, it's the closest parallel to what I learned in school. It was just so much information compared to the other ones, where with tax, I feel like if you understood either the individual income tax code and the business tax code, you're usually pretty good because they build on the tax codes kind of all work in unison, right? If you understand how they work, then you're usually fine for the exam. But with financial reporting, it's so many different subjects, and each account can have different implications and different things you have to remember. It's just such a wide range of information. It was hard to make sure I remembered it all. Topics are very random, and I can see on any of the exams why some people would trip up on any of them. Luckily, I have an auditing background, so I was able to lean on my understanding of audit to take audit. My business concepts exam, BEC, I have a background in business administration in undergrad, so luckily I was able to utilize a lot of that learning. But yeah, it's tough. I think any of the four are really can be challenging. So I don't like to say which for sure are the hardest exams because it really just comes down to the person and how they can retain those very different types of accounting knowledge.
In what order did you take the CPA exam?
So the orders I had originally tried to take the exam was, and I got this through looking at YouTube videos and reading blogs and everything. Was, they said take one of the hardest ones that they deem hardest, which was Reg or FAR first, to get it under your belt. And so I took Reg first, and I did not pass it. So I actually took the approach of I was gonna get some of the what I deemed as easier exams done, and worry about the tough, difficult monsters later. So the order that I took the exam, so I took audit first. I got a 77 on audit. I took BEC second, which I got a 78. I took Reg, which I got a 77. And then FAR was the one I left for last. And I actually scored the best out of all of them. I got a 79 on that one.
How long did it take you to finish the CPA exam?
So it took me a while, and a lot of it is because work came up. So I had passed audit December of 2018. I passed audit December of 2018. I had busy season come up from January to April, so it was impossible to try to take a test at that point. I had gotten ready to take BEC right after busy season in June. And what had happened was I locked myself in my room to study for a whole week. I took a week off to study. And on test day, I got sick. Yeah, I came down with like a nasty cold. I think it's because I probably stayed like in my room just studying, not like taking any breaks or not going outside to get fresh air. So I think once I emerged to go outside that morning, my body was just shocked. So I got sick during the exam. So I only finished the multiple choice question portion of it, and then I had to leave because it was impossible for me to think at that point. So I had got my test results back. Obviously, I had not passed, but I scored fairly well for only doing the multiple choice questions. So I, got my NTS again, took it right before the 4th of July, ended up passing it that time. At that time, I had scheduled taxation for October. I had passed it in October, and I was trying to see if I could hurry up and take FAR before my busy season hit again in January. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to, so I had pushed it back to the end of January. So even though it is busy for me at that time, it's a gradual busy, so I figured maybe I can try to sneak it in before that happened. Didn't happen. Client had some deliverables that they wanted in January, so I had to push it back again. And during this period is they had the blackout months. And so my client filed the beginning of March. And I want to say the blackout period was like on that 19th of March or something. So I figured I'd have like 2 or 3 weeks to cram and just see if I could do it. The day the client was supposed to file, they actually pushed it back another week. So because of that, that messed up all my timing. So by the time busy season had ended, I was exhausted with work and just wasn't ready to take the test. So I had scheduled to take it once the blackout month had released, and coronavirus happened. So once coronavirus happened, like the California State Board of Accountancy had shut down, like their offices were closed. This is the beginning of March, so everything shut down at this point. And studying for the CPA exam, I was still doing it, but I wasn't really too sure what was happening because the testing centers were closed for like 2 months. So again, because of that, I had audit expiring June 6th. So I needed to take FAR by June 5th. And luckily, well, it's unfortunate because coronavirus is here, but because of that, they extended the expirations of the exams, I think by 3 months. And then they extended it again because things were still shut down until the end of the year. So audit was no longer in danger of being of expiring for me. So that was a breath of fresh air. So I had set up to take FAR in June. I took it. I did not pass, but I restudied. I honed in some of the material that I felt like I was a little bit shaky on the first time. Took it again and passed. I passed in the beginning of October. So and then I was done. So it worked. So it was tough trying to get FAR scheduled and through coronavirus and not having to worry about that anymore. But I was able to get it done. So that's my long-winded journey of finally passing all my exams.
How did you stay focused and maintain the drive and self-discipline to pass this exam?
That's a good question. I would say I stayed focused. I think it was easier to stay focused once I had a routine down. I am a night owl, so I would study after work. So I had a calf that I would go to. So I'd literally after work I'd maybe go to the gym for about an hour. If I didn't go to the gym, I might do something just to, decompress from the day, and then I'd immediately go to the calf, or I'd immediately go to like a coffee shop and kind of just lock in and study for 3-4 hours. And it was a routine, so I knew at the end of my workday I'm gonna do this. So it's much easier to do it. And then on Saturday and Sunday, I think I just had to tell myself that I told myself if I sacrificed the free time I had now, the sooner I'd be able to enjoy the free time in the future, right? Because if you're kind of halfway in, not really taking it seriously, you're only going to extend the amount of time it's going to take for you to pass this type of exam. And no one wants to spend months or years studying continuously something that takes up your free time and just adds a lot of stress to your day-to-day activity. Yeah, I mean, and I would say, just keep in mind, one, you want to get certified, so that should be motivation within itself. And then two, you don't want the work you've been doing to be a waste. So the best way you can make sure that you're not wasting your time studying is to make sure you see it through and accomplish the goal you set for yourself.
What were your top CPA exam study preparation mistakes?
That's a good question. I would say my biggest exam prep mistakes were sometimes getting too caught up on very specific things. Like if it was a very specific, like this situation only happens like 10% of the time for this account, and it has to be these types of circumstances for it to happen. Um, I think I had originally spent a lot of time on those types of questions to try to make sure I understood it, when the likelihood of that being asked on an exam is just not that likely. I think you kind of have to, at that point, understand the probability of questions and understand, okay, even if they did ask it, is one question versus a whole exam. So it's best that you understand everything, maybe not as in depth as you would like, versus knowing one topic really, really well, and then you don't see it on the exam, and you're like, what the heck? So I would say that was probably my first. My second, in terms of exam prep, or even during taking the exam, I would say my first mistake was I didn't pay attention to the clock. I didn't take advantage of the time stoppage break, which is I would recommend everyone take it, even if you're not using the bathroom or getting a fresh air. Just take it just to kind of breathe a little bit and gather yourself before you go back in for the second half of the test. And again, just don't get hung up on that one question. If you don't know it, just answer it to the best of your ability and forget about it, because you have a whole exam in front of you. You have to make sure you pass. And the third thing, in terms of mistakes with exam prep, I would say, while you should be dedicated to your studies, make sure you're still taking time to do activities that like help you, relieve stress, or spend time with family and friends. Not saying you have to go out every weekend, or you should be sacrificing studying time to be social, but hanging out with somebody for an hour or two, or even just taking a day off, isn't gonna ruin your studying schedule completely. And you'd be surprised how much better you feel when you get back to studying after you've been able to kind of just relax and clear your head and just enjoy some free time doing what you like to do.
And what advice would you like to share?
I would say to everybody currently studying and in the future will be studying for an exam, is to craft a effective study schedule that works for you, an effective study schedule that is realistic, one that is gonna make you the most prepared you'll be on test day, and just have confidence in your learning abilities and what you're capable of. I think everybody that is eligible to take the CPA exam has seen and experienced many of success in their academic career, even to just get eligible to sit for the exam. So I would say have confidence in your abilities with what brought you here, and then just execute and get it done. One more thing. I would say from experience, I hesitated to take the exam because I was very afraid, and I think the myth of the CPA exam kind of intimidated me a lot. But I would say for folks that are um, having those same types of feelings, in terms of just the sheer uh, weight of studying and taking 4 exams and possibly having to take 18 months just to get it done, if not longer, I would say just start the journey. And then, once you work as hard as possible, before you know it, it will end. And once it's over, you'll be really glad that you conquered it. And I think a lot of your preconceived fears, you would have realized, are just fears itself, and not something that was actually impossible for you to do. And if I had to give someone tips on how the test was, the accounting knowledge within itself it's not the hardest stuff in the world. I think it's the timing that they only give you uh, a, a restricted amount of time to do it. That's a long time to take an exam with no hiccups, or if you have a brain freeze, or like writer's block. You kind of have to be flawless for a long period of time. And that's just the exam itself. You also have to be close to flawless in your studying leading up to the exam, because if some life event disrupts that, that's gonna mess up your test when you try to take it in a month. So I think the planning for it might be the hardest thing, and making sure you just one have the free time and just hope that nothing comes up, whether it's work or personal life, that can derail you from this test day. And then when it's the test day, it's that whole process of waking up, getting there early enough, having to, sit in the testing center and kind of try to run through things without psyching yourself out. So I think just the whole process of from start to finish is just very tough to see. It can be very tough to see it through. Well, there's only so much time you have, right? I feel like, at least for me, no matter what study plan I had, I always seemed to just run out of time, whether it was work, was a little bit later than I had expected, or, the hour break I told myself I was going to give myself turned into 2 hours, and just having to adjust. And again, yeah, try to cover as much material as possible, but definitely don't fry your brain to the point where it's test day and you blank out. Once you get started with something, just see it through, for the very simple fact that you've already dedicated a lot of time to it. Now you might as well get the reward for doing it. You can start hanging out with friends and enjoying your free time without having that thought of, I should be studying in the back of your head. It's a great feeling when you learn you passed that last exam, and all your hard work has finally translated to what you set, that goal you set the first day you started signing up and getting all your documents ready to be eligible for the exam. So accounting careers for not having a CPA. I was just trying to see, like, what's it gonna look like for me if I don't do this. Um, but I would recommend anyone in this field to take the time and just dedicate it and get it done, and then you're set for life. And if I could do it, then you all could get it done. Trust me.